Hey, welcome everyone. Hi,
Howdy,
Jay.
howdy.
Nice to have you back. Yeah, you're not tired of this stuff yet, huh?
No.
Yeah. So, welcome everyone in chat. As you're all coming in, sorry if I don't get to you individually. The motive we're going to talk about. For anyone in the chat that were watching the replay later that's not familiar, it was a 4-part documentary that just came out in October of this year on Netflix. It's an Israeli documentary. It's done in a very different style than you may be used to. Would you say, Jay? That's kind of quirky. Little bit. Oh, the evil laugh. The evil laugh. Oh, Jay, this will be good. Oh, it was. I have to thank a friend and moderator and supporter of the channel who tossed this my way, and I'm going to thank you first because it has boggled my mind for days, including today for several hours, because it has everything but nothing, because it doesn't have what I'm used to. Like, I couldn't look up a legal document. The case is sealed, right, Jay? You can't find crap about anything except for the articles that they wrote for the documentary or about the documentary, at least here in the United States. In Israel, you can probably look up more of the articles that were written by some of the ones who actually participated with the documentary. What was her name? Ruthie Yovel, who did the really long post in so-called imprisonment, and I'm doing air quotes, but you can't see it because I'm an avatar. His post imprisonment, and there's not a lot. Like, I'm used to looking at the evidence. I'm used to looking at statements and investigative reports and affidavits and warrants, and then the back and forth with the lawyers. Nothing, right? So I think I'll start with just a little brief synopsis of the crime. Would you say, Jay? Would you say?
Go for it.
Yeah. He says the motive is a documentary about the crime committed by a 13-year-old boy. Killed his parents and his 2 sisters, his mother, his father, and his 2 sisters. It happened in 1986. It is in a little town called In Karen in Jerusalem. And he immediately confessed. Immediately confessed.
He didn't immediately confess.
Well, within hours. I mean,
yeah. Originally, he said that somebody broke in. They were like, "Yeah, that's not what happened." He goes, "All right, fine."
Then he said, and then his confession isn't exactly a confession, is it? Also.
Well, yeah, it's. He admits that he did it, but he wasn't the one. He didn't kill anybody.
Right, because it was a green demon. He was possessed. Yes, like something
Yeah,
took him over. Something
green.
took
Yeah,
over his
green
body.
monster is what he called it.
The green monster, right? And yet he was possessed at this time. But curious enough, and it is a violent crime. It is performed by a 16 gauge shotgun. That the father,
M16 assault rifle.
yeah. Oh, an assault rifle, yes,
Yeah,
and
M16.
mhm, mhm. Which was quite chilling because he first of all he knows how to use it, which is not that unusual because his father was in the military and he was on reserve and he had just gotten home prior and he had shown him how to use it from what I heard in interviews, that he was well versed in how to use the weapon through training with his father, which at that age, because he's 13, is not unusual in Israel. They all serve in there. As a matter of fact, the older sister, who was only 19 at the time of her murder, was doing her active military service with the Israel Guard. So his other sister was also older. She was 18 years old and in the 12th grade. His parents were only in their 40s. And as I said, it was a 13-year-old boy. By all accounts, was the sweetest, gentlest, most intelligent student, got along with everybody. Teachers praised him for his intelligence and his demeanor. Um, Not a hint of anything throughout the neighborhood or the family of anything going on in the
Well,
family.
he used to write one girl poems and leave them in her pencil box.
She said he was the sweetest quarter, that he was just such a gentle soul. I mean, like, can you imagine a 13-year-old boy who writes poetry to a young girl he's so respected? And that's an interview I want to talk about in a few minutes because her ending interview, if that was it. She said he was quite charming and he was such the sweetest soul. Like they could not think of him harming anything. Like he's the kind of person that would put the bugs outside the house rather than squish them. That kind of person, like gentle, soft, and intelligent, very, very intelligent. Nothing, nothing clever or eyes darting or anything of that nature ever. No one that was interviewed ever said a cross word about him. Not even that, when something like this happens, somebody in the neighborhood's going to say, I always knew there was something wrong with that kid. He had shifty eyes, or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? Like, Jay, there's always one. Not one. I didn't hear it. Did you find anything? I found
No.
nothing bad to say about him at all, which makes it for me even more bone chilling. I have to say, and as someone who researched Marilyn Manson's assault cases for 3 months and all the individual stories, this disturbed me more than that. And that's saying something because that
See
disturbed
this.
me for weeks.
See
Yeah,
this case did nothing for me. It's a
nothing.
fascinating case, but I didn't find anything really
Yeah.
that stood out for me other than the perpetrator was a 14-year-old boy.
Okay, so you know what the hook is about this case, right? The motive. You know how you tell me all the time, like
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about, is there evidence?
Yep.
Is there this? Okay, so yeah, there's evidence, right? The blood, everything. The way in Israel, the very next day after he was arrested, because like they found him at the neighbor's house, he had the presence of mind, we know from history, that the murder is committed. He changes his clothes and goes next door to the neighbors. He didn't want to upset the neighbors by the amount of blood that was on his clothes.
Mm-hmm.
He changed his clothes, he got all presentable, and he went next door to wait. And he at first did that story about the robbery. And as soon as they said, no, that doesn't look like the robbery, nothing was taken. He goes, okay, I was possessed and, I wasn't myself. He lays out it was me, but it wasn't me theory immediately. Boom. He gives himself
And he
an
also
out.
blamed the movie Pantheon.
Yes, he said, he said, I just saw that movie, right? And where the boy was possessed and killed. He goes, and I think it's like that's what happened to me. like, and, and admits it. He owns it up. He's like, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
saw it. And that's what I think happened to me. And boom, there you go. So he's a 13-year-old kid. And they're looking at him like, this cannot be. Like, this can't be. Like, and he's not. acting like a psychopath. That's the problem. Like, you know, what we think a psychopath could act like. What is a true psychopath, huh, Jay? Like, that's the
Oh,
questions I have now.
I got definitions for you if you want.
Well, go, Jay. Oh, Jay, go on. Okay, tell them what the definition of a psychopath is. Go
I'll
ahead.
tell you there's a correlation between psychopathy and sociopathy. So your psychopaths and your sociopaths. Okay, both a psychopath and a sociopath will usually, it is what is known as a shared diagnosis, also known as antisocial personality disorder. The DSM-5, which is the up-to-date psychological manual for psychologists and whatnot, defines antisocial personality as someone having 3 or more of the following traits: regularly breaks or flaunts the law, consistently lies or deceives others, is impulsive and doesn't plan ahead, can be prone to fighting or aggressiveness, has little regard for the safety of others, irresponsible, can't meet financial obligations, and doesn't feel remorse or guilt. Those are the shared characteristics, and they must meet 3 of the or more of the following traits. From what I've seen, the only one that I know, the only one that I see that fits the boys that doesn't feel the remorse or guilt, but we'll get into that later.
Yep.
Unless he consistently lies and deceives others. But we're gonna go into here this real quick, real short definitions. Psychopaths in general have a hard time forming real emotional attachments with others. Instead, they form artificial, shallow relationships designed to be manipulated in ways that most often benefit psychopaths. People are seen as pawns to be used to forward a psychopath's goals. Psychopaths rarely feel guilt regarding any of their behaviors, no matter how much they hurt. Most of your serial killers fall into this psychopath definition. Right. Now, a sociopath in general tend to be more impulsive and erratic in their behavior than their psychopathic counterparts, while also having difficulties in forming attachment to others. Some psychopaths may be able to form an attachment to a like-minded group or person. Unlike psychopaths, most sociopaths do not hold down long-term jobs or present much of a normal life outside the world. While sociopaths engage in criminal behavior, they may do so in an impulsively and largely unplanned manner, where psychopaths will plan things out. They may become agitated and angered easily, sometimes resulting in violent outbursts, where a sociopath will engage in criminal behavior, but they tend to do so in ways that minimize risk to themselves. So, yeah.
Okay, so having all of that, I don't know how the chat feels about these, but with those 2 definitions, he doesn't fit either one. Not in a box. And
you can't put him into a box. Yeah.
You can't. His psychotherapist alone, because part of the Israeli process was that he had to go to a 10-day evaluation. The same thing would have happened here in the United States. This is a horrendous crime. He's confessing to it, but they can't find a motive. They don't know what's with this kid. Like, he looks like a normal 13-year-old boy, like any son. It could have been anybody. And that was the chilling thought for the investigators. Some of the investigators are still so disturbed by this 35 years later that you can hear the anger in their voice. You can hear the frustration that they could never find the motive for this case, and he will not speak. Now, the fact that he will not speak on why it happened or what happened before or anything else going on, any hint of motive whatsoever, is chilling to a psychopath because he has that much control. Would you agree? This child, this 13-year-old child, this 13-year-old child asked the investigators 3 hours into the investigation while walking around the house, "Can you pull fingerprints to actually prove I did this? I mean, that's part of your job, right?" Quote, unquote.
Well, okay. Raven's got a quick question. She said, "Is this the story where the family owned a store and then were all well liked?"
They were all well liked. I don't know about the store, but they were very well liked. Yeah. Rumors about the father came years and years later. Only, I think, and they are saying most likely because there was rumors about the movie being produced. Because all during the investigation, not a hint that the father had done anything untoward towards anyone. There was never anything. As a matter of fact, the younger daughter, the 18-year-old in the 12th grade, was attending weekly counseling at school, and not a hint that anything was going on at home. And she was of the age, the counselor said, that you would pick up something. Like, she has no hint whatsoever that anything's going on at home. And I'm not going to use words to put imagery in people's minds, but you know what they could be saying happened when a 13-year-old boy decides to kill his whole family. Everyone's thinking something must be going on in that family that's just not right, like something he couldn't handle. But there's nothing. And he's been interviewed extensively by psychologists and the investigators. They wouldn't let it go. They wouldn't let it go. He confessed. Within 2 days, he did a walkthrough of the crime scene and held that gun and showed them exactly what he did step by step. And they are saying it matches the crime. He had absolutely no remorse. None to this day. None. He cannot say why. He will not say why he did it. I'm sure he can say, but he will not speak as to the why or his mental state, except for that he was possessed at the time. And it wasn't him that did it. When he got to the upstairs where the sisters were, and his sister that was 18, who was still in school, the 12th grader, she turned to look at him and started to speak. And he says he shot her anyway. And when asked why he would do that, he said, it wasn't me. I would not have. If I had control, I would not have. But it wasn't up to me. And that I found chilling. Like, he's either very, very clever or very, very disturbed. That's the cost of it.
He said he was. If you believe what the investigator said, which I don't have a reason not to, I thought was odd, and showed the psychopathy in this child, is when the investigator came in, he put the cup of coffee down and walked out, came back in a little later, and the kids were like, "What do you think? I'm a kid? Would you expect me to throw a tantrum and knock the cup of coffee off the table?" Oh, and then as he was talking to him, the boy kept going, "You've already asked me these questions."
And he kept saying, why does everybody ask me the same questions? Do they think you don't know what you're doing? You are the senior investigator, right? He was very challenging. And Peter brings up a good point that I was getting to. During the first court hearing, where they're doing the psychological evaluations and everything, and the judge is there and all, and at the end of that, they decide that he can go forward and be tried, because they do not find any reason to hold back. No psychological issue. He's mentally competent. He's not. They said they cleared him from psychopath and all of this other stuff. He wasn't a danger to himself or anyone else. A very intelligent, extremely high IQ, challenging individual, but all of his faculties there. And do you know that 13-year-old asked for a gag order from the judge?
Yeah.
In his He's like, he could have represented himself. This 13-year-old said, I would like a gag order. And right after that says, and could you please send the school books and everything so I can keep up my studies? I don't want to get behind in school. Like the presence of mind and the way the chilling part for me, he never skipped a beat. Like, you don't see him falter. He does not. The only time he shed a tear was the first time he saw other members of his family when they were finally allowed to visit him when he was being held before trial. And that was only, they said, happy tears to see someone, not even tears of guilt or remorse or shame. He felt no shame. No shame.
No, it's because in his mind, he didn't do it.
In his mind, he didn't do it, or he just,
or he's really good at bullshitting.
Yeah. Now, if he's a psychopath, it was planned out, right? He had to calculate everything, which one of the investigators is dead set that he knew exactly what he was doing, because of the weapon that was used, because of the mess that it makes, the sound. and because there were 4 victims. Now, if you are acting out of impulse or out of control, maybe the first one, maybe the second one, but by the time you get to go upstairs and get to the third one, who actually turns around and looks at you, you should have been altered in some way to snap back out of it. But nope, he continues on until everything is finished, and then has the presence of mind to change his clothes and go next door within minutes. We're not talking hours in a stupor. We're not talking the next morning or the next day. We're talking within minutes, left the scene, completely in different clothes to go over to the neighbor, because he knew they were coming. The gunshots were very loud. It's a close neighborhood. Everything echoes. It was something that shouldn't happen in the middle of the night. Yeah. But so not necessarily, like more like a planned out, like a psychopath, but then he's using the sociopath argument of I wasn't myself. It was an impulse. I was taken over by something. I didn't have any control,
Mm-hmm.
But the way he acted all during the trial and all during his in prison, his air quotes again, people, he's in prison in reform school, where he was free to carry on his education and had friendly relations with everybody. Not like prison here. He actually got to touch people, hug relatives that came to see him. He wasn't held back from much. In Indian law, you cannot imprison a child regardless of what they do. And because he was a minor, it didn't matter if they said he did it in cold blood and he actually said, I hated them and this is what I did. He still wouldn't have gone to regular prison. They would have put him in reform. He didn't even get murder. He got manslaughter under their law because they have no motive. They have to prove motive to get him for murder. What is the motive? Like all this speculation.
The biggest and most consecutive theory and the motive that I've seen, and this is from the investigators and other people speculating that's watch the show, it comes down to the money. With him being the youngest one, it means when his parents died, he would inherit the least amount.
Yeah, right.
And he didn't want that. And with his dad being military, he could lose his dad at any time, especially since they're in Jerusalem, and in the Middle East. There's conflict all the time. The biggest thing was it was all for the money. It was because he wanted to make sure he got the bigger share.
Yeah.
I, on the other hand, other than think this is a fascinating case, I have severe issues with the documentary itself.
Okay.
It is so lacking for me of anything substantial. It is very choppy. They jump around way too much between the investigators and the psychologists, and then what happened, and then back to the investigator, and then they're talking about something that happened a few days later, and then they're back to looking. It wasn't put together well for me. And I've got a comment here I wanted to read. It's from a website talking about it. This gentleman made a comment. He says, first, the crime scene based on blood spatter patterns in the bedroom does not comport with what the kid's explanation of what happened that he claimed he did. Second, with an assault rifle as an M16, you can get a first clean shot of victim 1, but the second, third, and fourth shots are much more problematic because they're going to wake up. An M16 is a loud weapon. For those of you that haven't fired one, I fired one being military. They are extremely loud. So he may have been able to get off the 1-2 to his mom and dad, but both of his sisters would have been awakened in that house. I mean, one sister woke up as he walked into the room. The other one was still asleep. And the 2 downstairs, okay, maybe, but the third one upstairs when he shot his sister that looked at him and then walked to the other room and killed the other one, there was no way that other one should have been still sleeping.
That's right.
And then go back to this comment here. Finally, the intimation that some deep secret family dysfunction was at play at the time of the crime does not provide any satisfactory motive. Such a dynamic does not explain why a family member would systematically dispatch a father, mother, and 2 siblings and then provide the explanation, I was compelled by virtue by the Pantheon message. And I agree 100% with this. This just doesn't, it didn't make any sense. If you wanted to tell this story, there was so much better ways to tell it. And like I said, I think that the editing was bad. I think the editing took away from the story itself. I mean, you're just bouncing back and forth way too much.
And to me, it looked like it was probably presented that way just to make it longer and just to try to drag it out a little bit, because it was all just pieced together interviews 35 years later. And
I think instead of 4 half-hour episodes, you could have done that whole thing in an hour.
Yeah, but let's just admit that as Americans, we are on a different pace sometimes than the rest of the world. We talk faster. We do think we are on the instant gratification wheel, so to speak. But myself, I kind of, I'm gonna have to go the opposite a little bit here, Jay. I found it intriguing, the interviews with everyone, because I was focusing more on the emotional impact. This is what the documentary spoke to me in the level of emotional impact and damage that was done to every single person that knew this child, and everywhere, that even people who just heard about it, everyone involved in the investigation. They talked to the psychiatrist that interviewed him after the crime 35 years later, and he was visibly disturbed by how calm this child, he interviewed this person. He could not even fathom that this crime was committed by the same person he was talking to. His therapist, his teachers, many of the investigators. One of them still so angry while he was talking through the interview. I could see the vein in his head pulsating. That spoke to me. That spoke to me of the questions that still are there. Like, how could this be? Why isn't there an answer when you don't have an answer for something? And just the justification of how calm he was versus the violence of the crime. Whether or not that gun could produce that blood, whether that is the weapon and the style on which he did it, there is no doubt he did it. And there is no doubt it was done. The blood that's there came from those bodies. I mean, something awful happened. And he admits it, but not the why. Not even if he planned it,
I guess I did misspoke a little bit, because when I talk about the blood spatter, what is meant by that is he was the guy, the comment that I wrote was, it was under an article that was talking about whether or not it was true footage or theatrical footage, like a recreation.
Right. Well, they did say in some parts, they did use the word recreation. They were careful to throw that in quite a bit. Yeah.
I know there's not a lot. The lawyer knows something that he's not saying.
Well, he, does he though, Jay? Because out of everybody that was interviewed, I mean, you saw his style, right? Like, he's the defense lawyer. Every episode, he's throwing a little hook out there, right? Like, well, could be. Like, you could hear him. I could see his little eyes twinkling as he's talking. This is his moment. Like, of everyone that was interviewed, he played it like an actor.
I didn't see that.
It so well.
I didn't see that.
That's the impression I got from him.
Yeah, what I got from him was he was just a shisty defense attorney. He even said he has defended people he knew kill people and got them off.
But even when he says that he has a theory, he doesn't even claim to know the truth. He just says he has a theory. He's very careful.
He has a theory based on the information the boy gave him.
Right. But he won't tell us what the boy said. Okay. And then he says, but if we knew, this is the hook. Like, he keeps throwing this out there, which this was the frustrating part of the whole thing for me, because he kept saying, if we knew, it would change how we thought about the whole thing. And I'm like, change how I thought. I think I'm confused. I think I don't know what's going on. Like, what's the change? Like, I don't have a thought, dude. Like, give me something so I can have a thought. And he's not giving us anything.
And I think the reason why he's not giving any information is because of Israeli law. He is not allowed to say
anything. Not allowed, right? Especially since he's a minor, and it speaks loudly to me, and it came up in the chat several times, and I think this is why, Peter, who sent this to me, I think this was what he was getting at, that this 13-year-old had the presence to know Israeli law so well. He knew he was okay. He could do this. He knew he could get the money, have a life, he could just, his whole family could be eliminated, and he wasn't going to have that much of a consequence. He knew the law that well, and he was using the law that well from day one. They look back now and they see the things that he said and that he set in motion, and he definitely took care of himself better than the lawyer did. That 13-year-old took better care of himself. He was very careful never to say anything to anyone in regards to the case that could be used against him. Not in interviews, not in therapy sessions, not with the psychiatrist or anybody who came to evaluate him or talk to him, not his family, not friends, not the guards, not a cellmate, not a word. That takes either great focus or great detachment. What do you think? Which one?
It's a little of both. I said without. See, that's also a problem when you're dealing with children, because the children don't have a full developmental psychology. You only grasp so much for so long, and their psychology is going to change as they get older. Whereas an adult psychology is going to relatively be the same, whether they be 20 years old, 40, 50 years old. The psychology is really going to be the same. But if you look at a child at 13 and then look at him psychology at him at 21, it can be two completely different people. Right. So we don't know that is a problem with a lot of these cases, is you can't deep dive into the psychology unless the psychologist that interviewed them actually gives you information. So we're not getting any information about the psychology from this kid other than what we've seen in the documentary, which really wasn't anything.
Except for that a psychiatrist that evaluates him and still is...
he says
absolutely not a psychopath. Absolutely not a psychopath.
Well, actually, what he says is he really shouldn't have made the diagnosis he made then. If he'd have known what he knows now when he talked to the kid then, it would have been completely different.
Yeah, because he's got years of history of the kid not having any remorse or any regret or any acknowledgement, because time has added to the severity of those incidences. You know what I mean? Like it's added more weight to it. At the time, you would expect a child who is traumatized, if he's traumatized, to the point of not reacting, which happens. You can either overreact or not react at all. I mean, you can get trauma to where you do not react at all. Because you can't deal with it. And if that was the case at 13 years old, then of course he would say he's not a psychopath, he's not got remorse, and he's not speaking on it because he can't handle it, But either way, he didn't think. Now he's thinking, well, they would take a lot of calculation to stay this quiet for 35 years and to still have no remorse and to go on living as if nothing. He has taken his day by day, as if nothing happened. He just keeps going on and working with what's best for himself, Shay says, to truly understand the blood spatter, you would have to review the forensic report. Exactly. But this child had the presence of mind to have everything sealed. And they probably would have anyway, based on his age and Israeli law. But he actually asked for that. Like, nobody's going to be able to tear this apart except for the people actually in the investigation themselves. Like, we're not going to get to pick it apart unless somebody gets creative and releases it later. Always Createful says, I feel that he was a very charismatic young man who could draw people in almost like a seduction. Even the reporter said she was drawn to him. Yes, in his later years when he was older. And he was quite the striking young man when he was older. Let me just see if I have a picture of when he was younger. But I don't have the one of when he was older. But just so that you can see, Mm. Let's see if that comes up. Let's see. Oh, if that's clear. You see how young and innocent, and that's the 13-year-old boy. This is only a few days, like weeks after. This is pretty much what he would have looked like on the day of the crime. You know, maybe not as cleaned up, but he was not shy, but he was quiet. He was personable, they say. Um, they as you say always, he presented so well and so like the reporter. I remember a statement she made. She said he came into the room and sat and talked with everyone as he knew everyone for a long time. He had no ill social grace whatsoever, no awkwardness about him, nothing. And yet the teachers say that he wouldn't look at them in school directly in the eye occasionally, as if he was masking. So there's that juxtaposition there. So whether that was because he was planning this at the time, I don't know. But from the day of the crime, he looked everyone in the eye directly, firmly, and calmly, with no darting, no, mischief, just, they said, with sincerity, and asked questions. Sometimes rather chilling questions about how the investigation is going and what people mean by things, trying to manipulate the investigation a little, like when the lead investigator, he tells him, that doesn't everybody trust the information you're getting? They're asking me all the same questions. He literally said that to the lead investigator, the same one with the coffee. Yeah.
that is actually an interrogation technique, and is to try to get him to trip up.
Mm-hmm.
And say things that they didn't say before, or change their story. And
but the 13-year-old knows that. Don't you find that chilling? I mean, there are aspects of things this child said at 13 that just chill me to the bone. And I don't know if they're playing it that way in the documentary because they are trying to set a story there. They're trying to give you information to try to start guessing what the motive was for this crime, because it is still, there is none.
I like Raven's comment here.
Which one? This is
what I was. This is He should show some form of emotion at the loss of his entire family. It was his only occurrence of violence, and there was none. There was no. Even when they took him to the gravesite, there was nothing, no emotions whatsoever.
Right. To be able to walk through that crime scene within 48 hours and reenact it. And did you see, if you watch the documentary, they have some of that footage. He is so calm. He's just showing them point, like nothing, like as if he's playing a part in a movie. It was unsettling for me. The real footage was more unsettling even than some of the interviews, the things that they said, because you could see his affect, and his affect was perfectly calm and presentable, but not the kind of calm where they're disassociated. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't look awkward. I would think if you're disassociated because of the trauma, or you don't want to deal with something, that you would be a little more awkward, at least from other interviews that I've seen and other real life footage. You're a little more awkward in your movements and in your presentation. And yet he was at ease. He was reasonable. They could ask him a question and he could answer them. He wasn't just going through the motions of what happened. He was there, 100% present, and able to answer all their questions as they went. To the point that, did you see the cinematographer or whoever that is that was photographing the walkthrough had to take breaks? He commented on he had to take breaks and walk away because it was just too much for him. But this 13-year-old was walking around like it was nothing. And it upset him so much that he physically couldn't hold the camera. But the part about this that gets me the most is the effects it had on people. Even now, 35 years now, the effects it had on me, and I know none of these people, but to watch what they are talking about and how they feel, and to see the emotion.
Child killers are It is a disturbing thing to watch. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you think of the Melendez brothers. For who's the
Mm-hmm.
one that pops straight into mind. When the two brothers that killed their parents just because.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the child killers are the ones that make you stop and go, what? It really makes you wonder what goes on in a child's head, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Shay says this is so chilling. Yes, I agree. It is rather disturbing. So I'm sorry. Keep the DM hate mails to a minimum, people. It
Mhm.
wasn't intended. But it is on the other hand chilling, but also fascinating in a way if you like to investigate these kind of things, which I do. But
Yeah, and
student says it's
yeah,
cold blood murder, straight up.
yeah.
Hmm.
Pete says he was showing them,
Yep,
like he watched it in the movie and knew the script where everything happened, and
exactly.
then like a Raven, like what I had said, it's like what you see children who kill their younger siblings and are caught. These children show no remorse.
Right.
You
But
know,
on those children, it's usually a deep-seated desire not to have the siblings around anymore. Like, something's been going on for quite some time. Yeah.
sometimes it's just I wanted to see what it was like.
Hmm.
I don't remember the name of the one boy who killed his sister, but they asked
Hmm.
him why did he do it. He goes, "Because I wanted to see what she looked like dead."
Hmm.
That was it. That was the only reason he did it. He wanted to see what she
Now,
looked like dead.
no, wait. I wanted to see what she looked like dead. Now, that is either a sociopath or a psychopathic
That's
thing.
psycho.
For
That's
sure.
psychopathic. That's psycho.
It's psychopath. That's got to be right
Yeah,
because but
that is definitely
yeah.
psychopathic behavior. But
But here's the
it's
thing.
harder in children because there's not a lot to go on in children
Mhm.
to pull
Well,
those diagnoses off. Now, I do want to make it perfectly clear: I am not a psychologist. I
no,
may
we're
be
not.
getting a lot of this stuff wrong. So,
No lawyers, no investigators, no psychoanalysts here. We're just
mm,
two people talking about the obscure, the absolutely bizarreness of this case. As always, it's
and,
just opinion,
mm,
Um, and he's already tried and free. Which that's another thing, Jay. They keep his identity so secret that after the documentary came out, people were trying to figure out who he was, and someone did, and he actually got fired from his job, and he had to
mm,
relocate his family and everybody again. And they keep moving him around because they did show pictures of him as he was older. So people could kind of like anybody who looks like them, like him, I feel bad for because they probably get a lot of crap. People
yeah,
probably come up and ask him, why did you do it? Like it's such a story over there. They still want to know. It's like a thing. They
yeah.
still want to know. That's why there was so much excitement for this to come out 35 years later. Everybody wanted to get involved. The list, let me just show you the list of people that
Well, while you're doing that, a couple of things
yep,
here. Raven
yep.
says there's always signs from birth in those types of cases with the child killers. And then Krabby says, I've known many a person who had zero remorse from what they did. That's why that's the reason I'm such a wary person.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times with the child killers, yeah, you will see signs um,
Yeah.
leading up to it. And with this case, from what I can tell, there were no signs.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It yeah, did this come up right? Let's see.
yeah, you get the list
Okay,
of.
yeah. Yeah, if you look at the people that, of course, the defense attorney and the prosecutor, but
Mhm.
all look at the head of investigations, forensic, teachers, classmates. This is 35 years later. This is not like while the crime is hot. 35 years later, people are getting involved with this. Neighbors, photographers, the press photographer, the journalist, okay, counselors, prosecutors, co-workers, everybody,
Mhm.
plus all the people that just added that didn't get their face on screen, all of these people are still being affected by this crime because there is no motive, which is the most fascinating part to me.
That is a good question Raven puts up there too. I want to know what kept him from reoffending. He was free as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
That is an
Had, mhm.
interesting. Yeah, why hasn't he reoffended? Um,
Well, like okay, I have theories. I have a theory.
and then
Um,
when you're done with that, then we'll address
okay.
Shay's comment.
Yes. Okay. So, Raven, I'm thinking I get a clear He's so intelligent. I had difficulty. Let me just precipitate my answer by saying that I had difficulty thinking of him as a 13-year-old child the more they told me the things he said. Everything he said and how he calculated forward is a clear, intelligent, highly intelligent, sophisticated, linear way of thinking that was more adult than most adults, in my humble opinion. That's just theory. That's just what I'm getting from all of the interviews. I really had difficulty relating to him as a child because of this. All right. So I'm getting a clear Dexter vibe. And anybody who watches Dexter,
I love Dexter.
You know what I'm talking about. Dexter's a genius, and he uses his evil for good. He only takes out the bad guys. So if this 13-year-old, Jay, new series. Oh please, Jay.
I know I can't. I don't have Showtime. I can't watch it.
Okay, I'm putting it out to YouTube. Any of you people out there that want to do Dexter with me, hit me up, because I am a you think I like legal drama and I get excited over these psychopaths? You don't have any idea how excited I get about Dexter. Oh my God. But I have read every book. I've watched everything like a million. Oh my God. But I get a clear Dexter vibe, because if he's out there doing that kind of good, let him have it. He's definitely got the brain for it. And apparently, without the remorse thing, he's got a taste for it. But, I don't think he's a psychopath. I don't think he's a serial killer. I really don't. It was a one-time thing. The thing about the inheritance in Indian law makes sense to me. It was a straight linear result thing. Like, okay, I am the youngest. I'm the boy. I should have been the oldest. I deserve everything. This is Indian culture. I have two sisters who are in the way. My mother's very sweet. She's not going to let this happen. And my father's a bit of a pedant. What do I do? Annihilation. Bingo, done, gone. I mean, that's how he thought. That's my theory of the motive right there. I think he was that calculating. The kid's brain disturbs me. I'm fascinated by it. I admire it, but it disturbs me. I don't want to run up against it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, most serial killers do start killing in their early teens, be it animals and sometimes people. Look at the Mary Bell case. Yes, just like Dexter, it was a traumatic event when he was younger, and then he started with animals, Did his plot work? Did he still inherit the family money? If he did, maybe he succeeded in his plan. Well, I can tell you he's living comfortably. He does have to work for a living. He has no restrictions on where he goes or what he does. He has a happy family life, except for that people occasionally, since the documentary, recognize him, and he has to relocate. He shows no signs of remorse to this day, and it doesn't seem that this crime inhibited anything he wanted to do with his life. He continued his studies the day after the murder. He turned in term papers within a week. His teachers came to the jail to make sure that he did not hinder in his studies at all and gave him extra student time. If he was that smart, he's also that clever in his manipulation skills of people. He had everyone helping him. Everyone. Because he was a 13-year-old innocent-looking boy with the mind of a 40-year-old criminal scientist. I don't know what to call it, but it's bizarre. Like the justification.
Now, when this comment from Krabby one supposedly cannot profit from their crime, in this case, and yes, that's true. We in the United States, a killer cannot profit from his crime, i.e., can't write a book in prison detailing what happened and profit from it. But in a situation like this in Israel, where he would inherit the money, I don't know how that's going to work, because I know in the United States, if you kill a family member for their money, you don't receive the money. It'll go to whoever's the next of kin or whatever, or they just won't give it out. I don't know what it's like there in Jerusalem, but I would suspect it would be probably kind of the same thing. But right. Yeah, he couldn't, and that's why they're in prison. Once they're out of prison, they can profit whatever they want. But while they're in prison, from what I understand, I could be wrong. From what I understand is if while you're in prison, you cannot profit from it, but
Mm-hmm.
once you're out, you can.
Right. There, you
Something
have to
like that.
remember, in Indian law is very it's very linear, historical, family oriented, inheritance, everything. I don't think they took his inheritance, if anything. But I have to investigate that. Here, it would be like you said, Jay. Totally different story. Totally different story. But the cultural laws over there are totally different. As it was, 4 cold-blooded murders, and he was out in 6 years for good behavior. Like here, you're going to get good behavior for murder? Murder? Like no. He went to reform school for most of his sentence, and he went when he got transferred to the prison. Then they worked on the parole board. Didn't want him. They said he doesn't belong here. He's not a criminal. They let him out for good behavior, and he went on with his life. Well studied, with whatever he wanted to do with his life, still going forward, still moving forward, still with some of his childhood friends and classmates, clearly intact. Let's talk about that girlfriend, the one with the love letters and the little poems and stuff, Jay. She talks at the very end. I believe it is in episode 4. She talks about finally seeing him again. And
see, I didn't watch
yeah.
episode 4. I shut it off halfway
Mhm.
through episode 3, going, "This is just dumb."
Mhm.
I mean, the
And
story
now,
was good. I just didn't like the way
mhm,
it was put together.
mhm. Well, and rightly so. I was fascinated with the emotional part. And some people don't react to that, but I did like that. I was picking up on that part because the fact that it was 35 years later really resonated with me. Like, why did it take so long for somebody to make this? And the point of the whole documentary is he still doesn't have a motive 35 years later, and it's still affecting people. And it still like doesn't fit, like nothing fits, like there's something wrong here. I think that was the whole point of the documentary, but I could be wrong because I don't understand their style that much either, Jay. But uh, the girlfriend from his school days, the one with the love poems you were mentioning, when she's saying what a sweet boy he was, when he courted her so tenderly for a young boy, which is remarkable on itself. It speaks to a gentle demeanor. It speaks to a lot of things as far as his character. She talks about meeting him in a sports event years later when he is much older, and so is she. And she is struck by the fact, knowing the history of what he did, not seeing him for years and years. Here he is, from a slight boy, so gentle and soft looking, a tall, dark man, with quite a presence, who owns the world. She looked at him and she said, "How can you be out here living your life doing a sports event? What kind of a prison sentence is this that you are out here after what you did?" And yet, and you look, he looked like everybody would just love him, like everybody would bring him home to the family and introduce him as their beau. And it chilled her to the bone, chilled her to the bone, just to see him out there like that, and to see him grown, and know that he's not going to have that much repercussion for what was done. Uh, that spoke a lot to me too, because she knew him in a different, tender way, and was horrified by what she's seeing now. The fact that he's walking free, just living his life like anything.
Yeah, it's the difference between
Hmm.
the laws on different nations. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many different things. I mean, some countries, even life in prison is only 20 years. That's it.
Yep. Yeah.
Some
It's
countries you can't get multiple. You can get one. That's it.
hmm.
They can't. You won't get hit with multiple life sentences. You get sentenced to life. You spend 20 years and then you're out.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's the case in Venezuela, Panama,
Yeah.
somewhere down that way.
Mm. So then let me ask you, let me just turn it a little bit before we wrap up on our hour. And the chat also, please weigh in if you have thoughts on this. How do you think this case would play in the United States? Here, if you're from the United States or you know anything about our laws, I see it playing totally different. I see people being afraid of him and locking him up for life, whether in a mental institution or a prison of some nature, because of the horrificness of the crime.
Well,
I think that the fact that he didn't speak about it would go more against him here than it did there. It weighed in his favor over there.
This is something me and Raven had talked about earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at you got to think about it at the time. Okay, this was 1986, which means it wasn't that far off from when Ed Kemper committed his first two.
Right.
His first two murders Kemper did was at the age of 15. He killed his grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
and he was sentenced to. He was in a Tescadero State Mental Hospital till he was 21.
Okay.
And then he was free. You know, he managed to convince the psychologists and everything there that he was totally cured and he wouldn't go on and boom about his business. But that's the difference. At a young age like that, he wouldn't have. I don't think he would have been sent to prison. I think he would have been sent to some type of mental facility. Just because of the way he acted.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm thinking. I think that
now, hang on, real quick. There is a possibility. There is a possibility though that once he reached adulthood, that he would be then transferred to an adult mental institution where he would spend his natural life. But like I said, I don't know too much about the way that would work out. Those would be my thoughts. But like Raven had put it, he would have to be deemed insane for that to happen.
Right, he would, and there wasn't anything to really. One episode cannot declare you insane. They can declare you insane for that temporary moment that the act happened, but he was clearly within his faculties afterward and passed the psychological examination. And I think he would here in the States too. It would totally depend upon which state of the U.S. he did it in. Yes, unfortunately, yes, it would because of the death penalty and things like that. It was 10 years earlier. And Shay says, let's remember, no, the man that killed the 3-year-old just got released and he did it as a child. I get that. I do. What strikes me about it is that here in the United States, a couple of things would have happened that would have really kind of messed it up for him. Media. Yes, Jay, could you agree? The media would have tore this apart. He would have been tried in the media. There would have been political pressure to definitely do away with this child. And since he was so disturbing in his demeanor because it was so affable, he was so likable, he was so just adorable, that would chill the bones of many people that came up to him as Americans, because we're just like, we're just like that a little bit. We'd be like, oh, hell no, we don't even want to deal with this. Let's just put him away somewhere so we never have to deal with it again. Like, get him out of my sight. Like I can't do it. And I don't know, even if the case got sealed as it did in Israel, I think things would have been leaked, unfortunately, because of the sheer fascination and the sheer it would have been worth the risk to some of these whistleblowers and media people to get it out there for the thrill and having it released. It's happening all the time. I mean, Morphew pieces of the Morphew case got released ahead of time. Dallo, Daybell, like everything's getting released, even though it's sealed like all over the place. Even Letitia Stouch, the letters to the judge were released before he even released them. Like, how does this happen? I just see it happening. I think we would have had a little bit more information, but I think the outrage would have been very vocal. Now, I'm sure they were outraged in Israel too, because like they are still talking about it 35 years later. They are not happy about this. There's a lot of stuff going back and forth about him having a life of his own now, and everybody's still wondering if he did it. They know he did it. They want to know why. They still want him to have some kind of penalty if he's not saying why. Like, they still want to persecute him for it. Like, he's already served his time. He's walking around free. He admitted to doing it. He has gone through their system, and the people they won't let it go. They won't let it go because he won't say why. They can't put it in a box and put it away. And I understand that.
There was a case. I can't remember what I was hoping I sent it to you, but I couldn't find it.
Shay has a good point.
Where the guy killed someone and all they're getting is involuntary manslaughter.
Exactly.
But he straight out gunned him down. God, I can't remember what case that was.
Is that the one he used like his mental state at the time that he couldn't tell the difference of like, you know, he was just reacting?
I don't remember. Sometimes I get cases cross referenced. Like I did that with the Morphew case and the Stouch case. I was getting them mixed up.
I have read clear cases where it's obvious that they murdered them. They pointed the gun, they shot them dead with all intent. But the reason it got dropped down to manslaughter is because there's the thing in manslaughter on whether you knew your actions were going to cause imminent death, that you were actually going to kill them. And so if they weren't in a certain frame of mind to know that actually, like if they were reacting in rage or emotional or full of passion, that you don't actually realize that the result of your action is going to be the result is going to be the death of someone. You're actually going to kill them. Then it goes down to manslaughter. It could be the actual same act, you know, step by step by step. And that will be the one thing that makes the charge less. I mean, I found that in several cases, and so that was true. And Shay has a good point. Casey Anthony was tried by the media and is free, and that is because that was with her. That was a good use of how they used that media play to help her. But she had great defense attorneys. Every time the media played something up, they used it for her instead of against her. It played well. They had to cast so much shadow of a doubt in that case that even with the evidence that they had, could not convict. There was too much shadow of a doubt. They were able to put too much doubt on almost everything that happened. And there was great, and there's the word for it. Sorry, there was just total fuckery in that case. Total fuckery in that case.
Yeah, be honest with you, I've never looked into the Casey Anthony case.
Yeah, I don't like the cases of small children, you know, so those disturbing for me. I will look into them, you know. I try to be separate myself, but even something like this, you know, something gets under your skin, you don't know what's gonna affect you. You know what I mean? This affect me, just the chillingness of how intelligent he was and how he presented, and I kind of feel like the girlfriend. I have issue with him walking around with no, you know, nothing happening to him, you know. But hey, there's Dexter. Maybe Dexter will get him. Maybe Dexter will find him. Yes.
You know? Here's something that I want to put out there. I like when we do a story like this, because for me, I wouldn't have given this story 5 seconds of my time.
I know you were like nothing.
You found it completely fascinating. I find it completely boring.
Right, and yet we could talk about it for an hour.
Yeah, but here we are sitting here talking about it because we're two different minds talking about the same thing, looking at it from two different angles. And that's the one thing I really like about what me and you do, is because we're not just two people parroting the same thing each other's saying. Like I said, other than the fact that he was completely psychopathic in this situation, the rest of the story is nothing for me.
Yet I find so many parts of it fascinating, especially on the emotional impact of everybody who is involved. I mean, come on, 35. I mean, are you with me, chat? Anybody out there on YouTube? 35 years later, they're still talking about it. And if you see the documentary, you can't help but notice on their faces. Check out that one investigator. His vein is popping on the side of his head every time he talks about this kid. He is so outraged. He's so outraged.
But see, just because it's 35 years later doesn't mean anything to me. H.H. Holmes was in 1896, and they're still talking about him now. So time makes no difference for me how long or what it is. It's just the story itself for me has got to have something, and to me, this story didn't have anything.
What it has for me is that we don't know,
and for me, we don't know doesn't.
I'm that curious. You know, chatty Cathy over here. 9,000 questions, rapid fire, and give me the damn answer like now.
Yeah,
but that's what the hook was. Yeah.
And for me, in this case, the reason why the motive for it meant nothing to me, it was the fact that how emotionally unattached he was is the only thing I found interesting in this story was just his emotional detachment. The rest of the story was the same story you hear a dime a dozen, probably 15 times a year here in the United States. You know, some kid goes off and kills a bunch of people.
Yep. Raven's got a good point. Are they still talking about it, or did the guys who wrote the docuseries rehash it? Well, they did have to get everybody involved in it, and they were all willing to participate. So I would say
but that doesn't mean they were still talking about it, though.
No, they're still writing articles. I did look into that. There was even the person who wrote some of the original, Ruthie Tobel, who wrote some of the original articles on it, who was quite impressed with him as a person. I mean, she almost wrote like she was like falling for this guy. Like she just thought like he was the bee's knees. Like, you know, she really tried to get into it. And she was the one who first started to hint that there may be a, I'll use the term incestual thing going on there.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't see it.
Thing. But no one else, not even the investigators, are hinting at it. She hinted at it as a sympathy thing, I think, to try to give him a life. If he has, here's the thing: without the motive, no one wants to give him the fact that he served his penance and can move on. Okay, without knowing the why, the people are the media and the people involved in the investigation are unwilling to give him the grace of being able to just move on with his life, because he won't come forward with the why, and that says a lot about human nature. It says a lot about mine. I want to know why. I do. Yeah, I do.
Now, for me, though, coming back, whether or not they're still talking about it or they bringing it back up, it is the 35th anniversary. So they could be playing on that fact that it's been 35 years. Right. You know, so whether or not the story's still being talked about, that's you know.
Well, they had to go through a lot of trouble to get everything on, you know, to get all that footage, all of the actual footage, to get the actual investigators and everything, because everything was sealed for a long time. It had to go through that whole thing where the time and everything. And I don't know what the law is about when they can unseal these things, but he is having some recourse
more than likely
now,
never. You know? It would have to be court ordered unsealed.
Right. So usually, they had to go through that process.
Usually when a case is sealed forever.
So it was a big enough issue for people that they actually went through the process to get it unsealed so they could use that footage and they could do this documentary, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to. So I do think that the people, and I don't know this for sure, but I do think the people of Israel and the media is still talking about this case occasionally and keeping it alive because they don't have the answers. I mean, it's human nature. I think that's just my opinion. I would be talking about it till the day I die. Yeah, I'll probably talk about it next week. Next month, next year. Now that my friend Peter has dumped it in my lap, I have to own this shit for the rest of my life until I find that motive. I don't know what I'm going to do, Jay.
You're not going to find a motive.
I'm going to make stuff up. I'm going to start writing short stories.
There you go. Little fan fiction. Little fan fiction for you.
Little fan fiction to exercise this demon right out of me, because that's what's going to have to happen. But on that, thank you, Jay. This was a joy, as always, because this is my jam. I love this shit, and I hope you continue to do it with me until we have nothing to talk about. But as long as there's crazy mofos out there doing shit like this,
we can keep talking. We can keep talking. I sent you like 2 different cases we could have talked about, which we were going to talk about, but you decided you want to do the motive instead.
Hey, when crazy gets dropped in my lap, I got to deal with it, Jay. I just have to deal with it right then and there. And I'm so happy we did, because this was awesome. So thank you, Peter. And anyone who wants to throw stuff at me, go right ahead. I might not get to it right away, but I will look into it because I love this.
I do want to talk about next week. I want to talk about the where's it at? The bodies of the missing New Jersey couple.
Oh yes, okay.
The 2 couple that were found 200 yards behind their house, like 2 days after they was searched.
Let's just get local and keep my ass up all night like it's not already. That's okay, Jay. You know what, people? Check us out next Monday. I think Jay and I might be talking about that. If I can. Yeah, if they don't find them, if they don't, solve it by then. Well, even if they do solve it, who knows? But on that, Jay, well, you got anything going on this week? I'll let you say.
We got Nexium on Wednesday. We're going to talk Allison Mack.
Yes.
Friday is the 6-pack Christmas episode, and will be the last one for the year. We're going to take the rest of this will be the last 6-pack for the year. We'll start back up in probably the first week of January, I think Chris said.
Yes.
Depending on what the date was. Hang on, let me pull up my calendar.
And both of those are on the Radicals channel, and you'll find those links on the back of my channel and my Twitter and everywhere. But
so from what I understand, this week will be the last week. Then we'll take the 3 weeks off and back on the 7th.
Okay, so it's going to be our end of year bash. So
end of year holiday special. If you have any funny Christmas things you want to send them my way, or send them to Claire and she can get them to me. Either way,
send the offensive stuff, people. He loves it.
And then
sorry,
Thursday at 7 on my channel, True Serial, I will be covering Robert Pickman, the pig killer, the pig farmer killer out of British Columbia.
So, check that out. And
if you missed the last episode, check out Baby Kate. That came out last week.
That's great. And Jay's channel link is in the description of this video, as always. And on that, tomorrow we will have AITA with Jack of Hearts here at, I believe it's going to be an afternoon show because he's from the UK. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But you can catch it on replay if you're busy. Everything else I'm doing, which is a lot because those 2 things Jay mentioned, like I'm there. And I'll be over there watching his serial premiere on his serial killer, as usual. One of the panel things I'm excited about is Friday. There will be no mayhem because I'm on that time of the month over on Cheshire Vic's channel with Aaron from EKZ, Micah, Mexican Baby, and Manya. And Aaron and I are just bringing that lovely series back to life. And I can't wait to talk with the ladies about everything and anything and start that up again. Everything else is on the back of my community tab. And on that, I think it's Jay. Thank you again. Thank you, chat, for participating. You make it great when you contribute because that's what it's about, the conversation. I love this stuff. Send me all the stuff. Send me all the stuff. And I hope to see you here next Monday, too.
Yeah, like Pete says, the back and forth between the two of us is what makes it.
Well, thank you. And I hope that we can keep doing it. And thank you, Peter. It's also the chat. I mean, I can't tell you how much I enjoy that they actually enjoy seeing us together, Jay, and they help us. Like they throw the stuff out. And I love that part of it too. So I will talk to you during the week, but definitely next Monday. And on that, I'm going to put the outro. We'll see you all in the chat and tomorrow and during the week. Have a good one. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah.